Welcome to Redstone class. Today we're doing advanced repeaters. There's a lot of videos out there about repeaters. So I'm going to start with the basics, and then I'm going to show you some more advanced stuff and stuff that people don't show you. I'm going to give you a bit more than the average video on repeaters would give you. I'm going to review 4 main principles. I'm going to show you 4 handy tricks you can do with them. I'm going to show 4 things you can use them for, and then you'll have 4 homework problems. Detecting any patterns? All right, so let's go over. Let's talk about the first principles of repeaters. So the first thing to know about a repeater, and you might not already know this, so the first thing to know about a repeater is that it repeats. Surprise! I know that comes as a shock, but essentially if there's a redstone signal at all, you're going to have it repeat and it will start over. So what a repeater does is it outputs a signal of 15, the strongest redstone signal, if it's able to reach. If it's not able to reach, then it doesn't. But if there's at least one going into it, then you're going to get a strong signal out. So second principle is the delay. So there are 4 settings you can have on it. 1, 2, 3, 4. And they will turn off and on the outputs after that number of ticks delay. So the minimum delay you can have on a repeater is 1 tick. More about that later, because there's actually a way to do 0 ticks. So 1 tick is when it's closest, and 4 ticks is when it's further away, and you just right-click them to cycle through. You probably already know this stuff. These are just the basics. So the third principle is that they push and pull. So whereas with a regular redstone signal, this is moving into this block. So if I were to, I don't know, let's say we put a torch on it. This torch will turn off if it's powered. So that'll turn it off. It doesn't pass through to the other side. Whereas with these, we're not going to bother with those. With these, it's able to pull. So if the block in front of it is powered, it will be able to detect that and the signal will travel through. Or it can push. And so it can push through and strongly power this so that it powers on the sides as well. And so that just in the way that a pressure plate pushes down or a torch strongly powers the block above it in the same way, this does it to the side. And so this block basically is acting as a redstone signal source in this case. Not with this one. This one, bad example. There you go. Yeah, you can see that this is not strongly powered. This is not acting as a redstone source. I think what I meant to do is this. You can see that there's no signal right here, as long as it doesn't come up the sides. So this isn't powered, or this is powered but not strongly, it's just weakly powered. And so it's not going to power anything by itself in the same way that this one wouldn't. But it's able to pull the signal through the block that's powered. So if a block that's powered is next to a repeater, it'll be able to pull it. And so that's actually really useful for getting redstone in places where it's hard to get. So the thing to know about it is that it only powers from behind and outputs on the other side. So follow the triangle shape on it, the arrow. And so none of these, you'll notice none of these are powering it. It can only power from right here in front. And so it's not going to power anything anywhere else. So if I were to put, let's say, I were to put a lamp right here on top instead of a redstone source. Bad example, but that's not going to be powered. And so it's important to know that it only powers where it's facing. It completely ignores anything else. Okay, so the fourth principle is the interesting one, which is locking. So when a repeater is pointed at a repeater, and only in this circumstance, then a bar of bedrock will replace the torch here. So if I were to turn this on, if this is powered, you can still change the timing on it, but it is locked. You are not able to send a signal through it. And so no matter what you do, this is not going to work. There's not going to be an output. And the reverse is true, which can have some very interesting effects. So if it is locked while it is on, so I have this on and I lock it, turning this off doesn't matter. So you've got a signal coming out of it even though nothing's going in. And so it's stuck in the on position until I turn this off, and then it will update and turn off like that. So locking is very interesting. I hope you're following along, and if not, I encourage you to play with this if you haven't played with it a lot. See, now when I let go, by turning this off, the signal is able to go through. So if I can stop it until I'm ready for the signal to go through, and then I can let it go through. And I can stop it, and the signal will keep going until I'm ready for it to turn off. And so that locking feature is very interesting. There's a lot of interesting side effects. So those are the 4 principles. They repeat. They can do the different delays. It's able to push and pull, and locking. So let's get on to the trick, shall we? The fun part. So one of the things you can do is you can add a little bit more length to it. So the first trick is when you are trying to run a signal a long distance, you can actually push it 2 blocks further. So let's say we had this, because a repeater is able to push and pull, this would power this block. And so I could put a repeater here, and I could put another block here, and you'll see we get the same effect that we would using a repeater otherwise, but because we put these blocks in, you can actually reach 17 blocks instead of 15 blocks. Isn't that neat? So that can really change how you design your redstone and how often you need when you need to run things long distance. I haven't met a lot of people who actually realize this or know it or use it anyway. So one of the tricks, if you're not a veteran of redstone, is that you can cause a really fast clock. So if I were to place a power source and break it really quickly, just for ease of doing it, if you're following along, use something big that's easier to hit. But if I were to place something and break it really fast that provides a redstone source, you can get a super fast clock out of this. And if you want to spam something, let's say you want to make an annoying piston, you'd have to actually power the piston. But you can do something really annoying or a really blinky light by causing a loop, and you just have to break the loop. So another one you can do is 2-way repeaters. This one's a little bit more complicated. I'll give you a chance to look at it. But essentially, by rigging up 2 torches, we can cause this line of redstone, whereas normally it only goes one direction. You can actually make a repeater that goes 2 directions by doing it like this. And so I can use this lever to power this redstone dust all the way down. And so it will come through and propagate. And so that's a way, using a pair of repeaters and some torches around them, you can actually cause it to go all the way to the other lever. You can have it propagate. And so if you need to run a redstone trail a very long distance and it needs to be able to turn on from both directions, you can send a signal in either direction if you use some of these. So handy. Another trick, and this actually doesn't involve repeaters, which is the funny thing, is this is how you would do a 0 tick. Now this is based on a bug. It's one of the strangest bugs in Minecraft because it's incredibly broken. This allows a 0 tick pulse or repeater. And so the repeater, this acts like a repeater where it will restart the signal, but because of the way pistons work and the way that they push and pull and the effects of having this block here, this redstone block, when I power a block that is being pushed and has a piston on top of it that would push this, this is instantaneous. And so this is a 0 tick repeater. It's actually a little bit nutty. If you chain these together, you could send redstone out to the horizon with no delays whatsoever. Now, I really hope they never fix this because it's niche enough and it requires enough know-how that it's not really a problem. It would be a problem if it was a simple thing that could accidentally be used and cause lag on servers. This shouldn't be a problem, though. I hope they never fix this because this is incredible to be able to have it be instantaneous transmission. And it's only one way, but it's still insane. And there's ways of doing a 2-way. I've actually seen people do that. But the general idea of this is, I just think it's amazing. Okay, so let's talk about 4 uses of repeaters. So the first one you've already kind of seen, which is that you can do a clock. And a clock is a blinker, basically. And you can do that in the key thing to know about this as far as uses is that you can do as many as you want. And you can make the speed of the on and off as fast or as slow as you want. And so you can do a ring like this, or you can have something that blinks on and off at whatever speed you want it to. This is a very important use of repeaters. It allows you to do all kinds of things. There are ways to do it with torches, but it's just really not practical, and you really can't manage the speed. So I'm going to speed it up. See, now I can make it go faster. Okay, so the problem is I have it too long of a on pulse, and so when I made it faster, it stays on. Interesting. Why is it doing that? Let's do this. Let's do a lever, and I'll do it super fast. Ready? That is really weird. Is that a bug in Minecraft? I must have put something down wrong. But you get the general idea. You can, you know what? It's because this one stays on for 4 ticks, and these are 111 ticks, so this one was basically drowning the others. So no, that's to be expected. If I wanted it to be that fast, they'd all have to be consistent. So there's something to be careful with, is if you have repeaters of different lengths, you can get some really interesting behavior. So there you go. That's kind of what I was expecting. So you can speed up or slow down your clock however you want. And so now I can slow it down with 2, 3, 4. So that's number 1. Number 2, pulse lengtheners and shorteners. They can be called extenders or limiters, but essentially you can design with repeaters the ability to cause, so this button is going to be on for 10 ticks, and then when it goes off, see that? You're going to have a single 1 tick pulse. Boop. And boop. And so it makes it really short. Now, you could do the opposite too. You can actually, so what I'm doing over here is I'm just locking it. And so what happens is it unlocks it at a time just early enough for the signal to come through before the signal is gone. And so basically at the last second, the last bit of this redstone manages to get through. So anyway, so the longest one, or so the lengthener, this is a trick that allows you to say a teeny pulse. So if I go on off, it will actually hold it on for much longer. On off. Because what's happening is when we strongly power this, it is putting redstone off onto this side like this. Oh, that causes it to loop backward. You don't want to do that. What you don't want to do is you don't want this to be able to go into it. You only want the power from this section to go that way, because if it goes the other way, then you get a loop and it stays on or it becomes a clock. When you do it this way, you get the ability for it to be on for longer. And so because it never loops back, because this is only output and it never goes back in. I mean, it would if you did that. But because it never goes back in, it causes it to on, stay on, stay on, stay on. So the on gets reset so that it can stay on for much longer. And you might see the numbers changing as it fades. So after this one goes off, this one's getting darker and darker. And so that's a very important thing for controlling how long you want redstone to be on based off of an input. And so if I put a button here, it's not going to be on for 10 ticks. It's going to be on for 10 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4 ticks. Does it make sense? So one of the things you need to know now is toggles. So this gets into the logic of redstone. We're not going to talk too much about it, but I'm going to have you do something with this for the homework assignment. So this is the ability to toggle state by using that lock. So when I push the button, this goes from off to on and from on to off. And so this allows you to turn a button into an on-off switch where you can just push the button one time and it switches the output. That's super useful, so you don't have to use a lever if you don't want to use a lever. You can use a button instead. It essentially turns a button into a lever. That's the easiest way to think about it. So the last topic is one that's a bit more complicated. In fact, I watched a video from Seth Bling, one of the old redstone pioneers, who built a buffer, and that's what we're going to talk about is buffering. But he had a problem where there was a bug, and it's still something that exists in Minecraft, but he tried to build his buffer like this. So as if he had, as if he had these right here, and he tried to do lots of these line by line. He didn't put a gap, and because he didn't put a gap, he had an issue where you couldn't have a one. If you had on, off, on, the one off in between would suddenly turn on. So I fixed that. So what I did right here is I designed a buffer, and essentially the idea behind a buffer is that we can update the state of everything and slide everything down whenever we send a redstone signal. And so what this does is now that one's on, now watch. So if I turn it off again and I say send it off, now that one moves here. And if I were to just push it again, now that one moves here. And so what you can see is we're just sliding which is on and which is off downward. So now if I do this, it's going to slide down one and this one's going to turn on. You ready? And see now I can show you, see how they move down like that? So this is where Sethbling had a bug. So essentially this one would turn on as it moved over, and you'd end up with 3 in a row on, even though you didn't have 3 in a row on. See, having a block in between like this prevents that problem. And one of the uses of a buffer, just to give you an idea, because this is a little bit more abstract, I've got these on 2-tick delays, and I've got this one on 4-tick delay, and that allows it to have just enough time to switch over. And so what this could be used for is a system for controlling like a train station. So what I've got right here is all of these in and on state, and by sending an off state like this, I can turn on this and I can propagate this minecart and move it to whichever slot I want it to be. So let's say we had hoppers that are supposed to pull certain items out, maybe they're filtering. What we could do is we can go, I want you to move on to the next one, and we won't worry about the next one. So now what we've got is we've got this one kicked on, moved it over, and I can say I want to move it to the next slot, and then I want to move it back around. And so this is something cool you could do with buffers. There's a number of things you can do with them, but this is the simplest way to explain that they do have practical uses, because it allows you to say, all right, move it to the next position. All right, move it to the next position. And you can do things with lamps. People do crazy things with displays because it allows you to control what's on. But essentially a buffer gives you the ability to, you have these, because this lock acts like memory, able to remember something, you can kick it to the next one and kick that to the next one. And so it allows you to essentially slide the on-off states of your redstone over one. And so that's one of the more complex uses, but I just wanted to give you a brief overview and then of what one would actually look like if it was working. So this one doesn't have any of the bugs that some of the other ones described. And then over here would be kind of a basic example, something you can do with it. And so that's it for today with repeaters. I hope you learned something. So now let's go over homework. Oh, wait, one last thing. So something you should know about repeaters is going to be, I think I missed this earlier, is that you need to know that with the delay, the way delays work is the delay happens before it turns on. So if this is set to 4 ticks, it's not going to turn on for 4 ticks. So if I turn off, it's going to wait 4 ticks before it turns on. So the wait that is implied here is at the beginning. What I mean by that, another way to put it, is that it's always going to match its output. So whenever this is on, this is going to be on. Whenever this is off, this is going to be off. And the best way to visualize that is with observers, because whenever I toggle something, this observer is not going to see any change for exactly 4 ticks, as if this observer was over here. Does that make sense? So what's happening on this block right here? We'll talk about observers in the future, but this is a good way to visualize it. What's happening right here is whatever the output is. And so whatever you see, whatever the repeater looks like, is its output. So the change is right here. The time delay, if you're looking at your redstone components, what's happening is the 4, it goes, this is on, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, then these are on. And so, you see that? So these are absolutely identical. So that's one thing I wanted to show with delays, because that's a subtlety of repeaters. Okay, so now we're done. So let's talk about homework. So for homework, I've got 4 things for you to do in ascending difficulty. So we'll start with the easiest one. The easiest one is I want you to just look at this toggle right here, and I want you to build it. That sounds a little bit boring, but this is super useful. Being able to turn an input from redstone that goes on and off into just a switch. So essentially turning a signal into a switch. So like from a button into a lever. Super useful. All of these are set to 1 tick. And you have, you're powering this one. So let's say you were to power it here. It doesn't matter. You could power it from here instead. Same idea. But what you've got is you've got a switch. This is super useful. That's your first homework, is just copy this, play with it. It's going to come in handy, and you really should know how to do these. It's called a T flip-flop. That's its technical name, but don't let the name scare you. People talk about, oh yeah, what this T flip-flop? What exactly is a T flip-flop? A T flip-flop is something that turns a button into a lever. That's all it is. And so you can call it a toggle for short. So whenever redstone comes in, it switches to the other thing. So second one is I want you to make a narrow clock. So remember we had a clock here? I want you to do this in a 1 wide. Second homework should be a fairly easy challenge, but it's to practice your understanding. So make something that blinks. Doesn't matter how fast it is, but make it so that it's 1 wide, so that it can fit like narrowly in a wall. And I'll show you different ways of doing that in the homework answers video. Just do a 1 wide, so it has to go up and down in a circle like that. You can go clockwise or counterclockwise. You could make it go down underneath and come back up, or you could make it go up and over and come back down. However you want to do it. So third homework assignment is, that's distracting. Third assignment is to make a lighthouse ring. This is a classic thing that a lot of people did over the years in Minecraft. Is they would have lamps in a circle. And what they would do is they put lamps in a circle at the top of their lighthouse, and they'd have it on. They'd go on. It would just kind of go in a circle. And so you'd have a ring of light, so a ring of on going in a circle. And so that's not super hard to do. Look at some of the stuff we've done. If you've been following along, you're going to have a much easier time with it. But try to make it where you have only, let's say, 1, 2, or 3 of them on at a time, and it goes around in a circle. This is a good test of clocks, and see if you actually understand how to make clocks work. So fourth homework assignment is the most challenging, and well, let me put it this way. It was really challenging for Mumbo when he first tried to play with locking because he didn't understand it well. But it was pretty easy for me to figure out. So if you have this is the 1 pulse. I want you to take this and make your own version of this shortener where it makes a 1 pulse flash, and I want it to flash as soon as you push the button rather than when it goes off. So when this goes from on to off, it sends a 1 tick pulse. I want you to redesign this and make your own that does the same exact thing, only that quick 1 tick pulse happens right as you turn as you hit the button. Now it doesn't have to be 0 ticks. It has to propagate through, obviously. So if it's 2 ticks, but you want it to be as fast as you can when it turns on. So maybe it looks just like this, so it has to go through these 2. But as soon as this turns on, you want it you don't want it to wait for it to turn off. So if I put a button on, let's say I put a wooden button on this, it's going to be even slower. It's called oak button now. So this one's on for 15 ticks. And so it takes even longer for it to switch. You want that 1 tick pulse to happen as soon as you push the button. And so that's your fourth one. See if you can figure that out. That's all we got for today. Those are the homework assignments. Go back through them. The homework assignments are 1, just copy this and get used to knowing how to do it. 2 is going to be that 1 wide narrow clock. Try and make a really narrow one. 3 is going to be to make the lighthouse ring of lamps, and then the 4th one's going to be to try and see if you can redesign this one. So those are your 4 homework assignments. It's a lot for this section, but there's a lot to do with repeaters, and they are easy to pick up and learn, but they're hard to master. And I really want to help you master them as much as we can. And so go through some of those. If you haven't followed through, you're always welcome to go back through the video and look at some of the different things we've done here. You're always welcome to come back and visit the video, obviously. Hopefully that's taught you a little bit more than the average video would about repeaters. That's it.